My daughter and her husband left me stranded in Costa Rica with no money, no passport, and no way home. But they didn't count on a stranger named Carlos helping me take back everything they tried to steal. 42 years of raising that girl, working double shifts to pay for her college, walking her down the aisle with pride. And this is how she repaid me, abandoning her 69-year-old father in a foreign country while they rushed back to empty my bank accounts. If you've ever been betrayed by your own blood in the cruelest way possible, if you've ever had family treat you like garbage to be disposed of, pull up a chair, friend. This story's got more twists than a mountain road. And if you like tales about people who think they're clever until they meet someone smarter, hit that subscribe button for Grandpa's Diaries. I've got more stories about family that'll stab you in the back while hugging you from the front, and how sometimes strangers show you more love than blood relatives ever will. I'm always here with fresh coffee and hard-earned wisdom about who you can really trust when everything falls apart. The trip to Costa Rica was supposed to be Linda's gift to me for my retirement. "Daddy, you've worked so hard your whole life," she'd said, showing me beautiful photos of beaches and rainforests. "Kurt has business connections down there, and we want to treat you to the vacation you never had time to take." Her German husband nodded enthusiastically, talking about eco-tours and world-class fishing that would be perfect for a man my age who'd spent 40 years building his construction business. I should have been suspicious when they insisted on handling all the travel arrangements, keeping my passport and documents safe in their hotel room. "We don't want you to worry about anything, Mr. Martinez," Kurt said with that charming accent that had fooled me into thinking he genuinely cared about family. "Linda and I will take care of all the details. You just relax and enjoy being a tourist for once in your life." The first 3 days were wonderful. Guided tours, excellent restaurants, and what seemed like genuine enjoyment of spending time together as a family. Linda was attentive and affectionate, taking photos of me at every landmark and talking about how proud she was to show off her successful father to Kurt's Costa Rican business associates. "Look at this man," she'd tell strangers. "Built a $1 million construction company from nothing but determination and hard work." But on the 4th morning, everything changed. I woke up in my hotel room to find a note under my door instead of Linda and Kurt at breakfast. "Dad, emergency back home with Kurt's business. Had to catch the first flight out. We'll wire you money for your extended vacation and help you change your return flight. Enjoy the extra time in paradise. You deserve it. Love, Linda." The casual tone should have been my first warning that something was very wrong. When I went to the front desk to call them, I discovered the truth that would haunt me for months. They'd checked out at 5 a.m., taking their luggage and my passport with them. My wallet was missing from my room, lifted while I slept, along with my credit cards, identification, and the emergency cash I'd hidden in my suitcase. Linda and Kurt hadn't just abandoned me. They'd systematically stripped me of every resource I needed to get home, leaving me stranded like a piece of unwanted luggage in a country where I barely spoke the language. Linda wasn't always a thief and a liar. She was my miracle baby, born to me and her mother Rosa when we'd almost given up hope of having children. Rosa had been a teacher, and I was just starting Martinez Construction with a beat-up truck and more dreams than money. We were living in a tiny apartment in East LA, but when Linda arrived with her big brown eyes and perfect little fingers, she made that cramped space feel like a palace. "Look at our beautiful daughter," Rosa would whisper, holding Linda while I worked late into the night on construction plans. Those early years were tough but beautiful. I'd work construction sites during the day and take night classes to get my contractor's license, coming home covered in dust to find Rosa teaching baby Linda to clap her hands or say "Daddy." Money was tight, but love was abundant. Linda's first word was "Papa," and I thought my heart would burst with pride. Every milestone, first steps, first day of school, first lost tooth, felt like a victory we'd achieved together as a family. When Rosa died in a car accident when Linda was 12, it nearly destroyed both of us. I was suddenly a single father trying to run a growing business while raising a grieving daughter who needed more emotional support than I knew how to give. But Linda was strong, just like her mother, and we helped each other through the darkest period of our lives. "It's just you and me now, Papa," she'd say, helping me with paperwork while I helped her with homework at our kitchen table. I worked harder than ever to give Linda everything she'd lost when Rosa died. Dance lessons, summer camps, college prep courses, anything that would help her build the future her mother had dreamed of for her. When she got accepted to UCLA with a partial scholarship, I was so proud I cried. "You're going to be everything your mama wanted you to be," I told her at graduation, watching her in that cap and gown that represented sacrifices Rosa would never see rewarded. College changed Linda in ways I didn't fully understand at the time. She came home talking about investment strategies and international business, ideas that seemed far removed from the construction world that had built our life together. When she met Kurt during a study abroad program in Germany, I was happy she'd found love, but concerned about the distance it created between us. "He's teaching me about global markets and European culture," she'd explain when I expressed worry about their relationship. Their wedding was everything Linda wanted: elegant, expensive, and held at a country club that made me feel out of place despite paying for most of it. Kurt's family flew in from Germany, sophisticated people who spoke multiple languages and made polite conversation about investments and travel. I felt proud of Linda but disconnected from the world she was entering. "You raised an amazing daughter," Kurt told me during the reception. I promised to take good care of her. I believed him completely. After the wedding, Linda and Kurt moved to an expensive suburb and started living a lifestyle that seemed to require constant financial support. They'd ask for help with down payments, business investments, and temporary loans that never got repaid. "Family helps family," Linda would say when I hesitated about writing another check. "You taught me that, Papa. And someday when your business is mine, I'll take care of you the same way." I thought I was investing in our family's future, but I was actually funding the comfortable life that would make them see me as an obstacle to overcome, rather than a father to honor. The warning signs of Linda's transformation started about 2 years after her marriage to Kurt, but I was too trusting to recognize them as red flags. She began asking detailed questions about my business finances, retirement plans, and estate planning that seemed motivated by more than casual concern for my future. "Papa, you're not getting any younger," she'd say during visits that felt more like business meetings than family time. "We need to make sure you're protected if something happens to your health or mental capacity." Kurt reinforced these conversations with European efficiency, bringing legal documents and financial advisors to family dinners like they were normal dinner guests. In Germany, families plan for transitions much earlier than Americans do, he'd explain, spreading contracts across my dining room table. "We want to help George protect his legacy and ensure Linda can manage his affairs if necessary." The word "if" always felt more like "when" in his accent. Linda's visits to my house became increasingly focused on inventory and valuation. She'd comment on furniture, artwork, and collectibles with an appraiser's eye rather than a daughter's sentiment. "Papa, some of this stuff is worth more than you realize," she'd say, photographing my late wife's jewelry and Rosa's grandmother's china. "Maybe we should get things properly appraised for insurance purposes. You wouldn't want to be underinsured if something happened." The requests for money became more frequent and more substantial. Kurt's investment opportunities required capital that somehow never produced the promised returns, and Linda's lifestyle demanded financial support that strained my retirement savings. "It's just temporary, Papa," Linda would assure me when I hesitated about writing another 5-figure check.
"Once Kurt's European contacts start paying off, we'll be able to pay you back with interest." I started noticing that Linda and Kurt spoke German to each other during their visits, especially when discussing finances or future plans. They'd switch languages mid-conversation, leaving me feeling excluded from discussions about my own money and property.
When I mentioned feeling left out, Linda would apologize and claim they were just more comfortable expressing complex ideas in Kurt's native language. "It's not about hiding anything from you, Papa. We're just more efficient in German when discussing business matters." The pressure to give them power of attorney intensified after my 70th birthday party, which felt more like a business networking event than a family celebration. Kurt had invited financial planners, real estate agents, and insurance brokers who all seemed to have prepared presentations about elderly asset management. "George is such an inspiration," one of them told Linda within my hearing. "But at his age, he really should consider transitioning control to the next generation before health issues force the decision." The Costa Rica trip was presented as their way of thanking me for years of financial support and celebrating my successful retirement from active business management. "We want to show you how much we appreciate everything you've done for us," Linda said, showing me gorgeous photos of the resort where we'd be staying. "Kurt has business contacts down there who can show us the real Costa Rica, not just the tourist stuff." But now I understand the trip was really about getting me out of the country, while they executed their plan to steal everything I'd worked my entire life to build. The day Linda and Kurt abandoned me in Costa Rica, I realized their plan had been months in the making. While I was sleeping off the exhaustion from our sightseeing tour the night before, they'd been systematically removing every resource I'd need to get home or contact help. My passport was gone from the hotel safe where Kurt had insisted on storing it for security. My wallet, credit cards, and the emergency cash I'd hidden in my suitcase had all vanished while I slept, drugged by whatever they'd put in my evening drink. The hotel manager, a kind woman named Maria, tried to help when I explained my situation, but without identification or payment method, her options were limited. "Senor Martinez, this is very unusual," she said, reviewing the registration records. "Your daughter and her husband checked out at 5 a.m. and said you were extending your stay indefinitely. They paid through tomorrow night only and left no forwarding information." The calculated cruelty of leaving me with just one more day of shelter made my blood boil. I tried calling Linda's cell phone from the hotel lobby, but the number was disconnected. Kurt's business line went straight to a message saying their offices were closed for indefinite restructuring. When I finally reached a neighbor back home in Los Angeles, I learned the devastating truth. Linda and Kurt had returned to the United States 2 days earlier and were already moving forward with legal procedures to have me declared mentally incompetent due to my disappearance in Costa Rica. The neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, told me that Linda had filed a missing person report claiming I'd wandered away from our hotel group and couldn't be located despite extensive search efforts. "She's been crying on the news, George," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice full of sympathy for Linda's performance. "Says you've been showing signs of dementia, and she's afraid you're confused and lost somewhere in the jungle. The police are treating it like an elderly person with cognitive decline who got disoriented." My bank accounts had been frozen pending a competency hearing that Linda had petitioned for based on my alleged mental decline and mysterious disappearance. Kurt had provided documentation of my erratic behavior and poor financial decisions as evidence that I needed legal guardianship. The construction business I'd built over 40 years was being placed under emergency management to protect the interests of employees and clients, while I was presumed incompetent and missing. The most sickening part was learning that Linda had already moved into my house, claiming she needed to secure my property and manage my affairs during the crisis. She'd hired a storage company to remove dangerous clutter and was working with real estate agents to downsize my living situation for when I was eventually found and required assisted living care. Everything I owned was being systematically cataloged, appraised, and prepared for sale under the guise of concerned family management. That night, sitting alone in my Costa Rican hotel room with 24 hours before I'd be homeless in a foreign country, I felt the weight of complete betrayal by the daughter I'd loved and supported for 42 years. Linda hadn't just stolen my money. She'd stolen my identity, my reputation, and my legal standing as a competent adult. She was painting me as a confused old man who'd wandered away and gotten lost, while she played the grieving daughter heroically managing the crisis. But Linda had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the determination of a man who'd built something from nothing once before and was ready to do it again, even if it meant starting over at 69 in a foreign country with nothing but the clothes on my back. The next morning, facing eviction from my hotel room with nowhere to go and no resources, I met Carlos Mendoza in the lobby. He was a local attorney who'd overheard my conversation with the hotel manager and recognized the signs of what he called inheritance theft tourism. Families who bring elderly relatives to foreign countries, specifically to abandon them while seizing their assets back home. "Senor Martinez," he said in perfect English, "this happens more than you might think. But you're not alone, and you're not helpless." Carlos explained that he'd built a practice specifically helping elderly Americans who'd been victimized by family members using Costa Rica's distance from U.S. legal systems to commit fraud. "Your daughter chose Costa Rica because she thought you'd be trapped here without resources or legal recourse," he told me over coffee in the hotel restaurant. "But Costa Rica has strong international law protocols, and I have contacts at the American Embassy who specialize in these cases." Within hours, Carlos had contacted the U.S. Embassy and initiated emergency procedures for documenting my identity and circumstances. The embassy had seen similar cases and moved quickly to issue temporary travel documents and contact American authorities about Linda's fraudulent missing person report. Your daughter made a mistake filing false police reports, the embassy official explained. That's a federal crime, and it gives us grounds to investigate the entire situation. Carlos also connected me with an American law firm that specialized in elder abuse and fraud cases. Through video calls from his office, I learned that Linda's actions constituted multiple felonies: identity theft, financial elder abuse, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Mr. Martinez, your daughter has created a paper trail that will be her downfall, Attorney Janet Wilson explained from her Los Angeles office. Every document she's filed claiming you're incompetent contradicts the evidence of your competency that we're gathering right now. The most powerful weapon in our arsenal was technology. Carlos helped me document everything through video recordings, photographs, and time-stamped communications that proved my mental competency and explained exactly what Linda and Kurt had done. We recorded detailed accounts of their planning, their theft of my documents and money, and their systematic abandonment of me in Costa Rica. Every video was time-stamped and geolocated, creating undeniable proof that I was coherent, competent, and the victim of a calculated crime. Within 48 hours, Carlos had also connected me with Costa Rican authorities, who confirmed that Linda and Kurt had lied on their departure forms, claiming I was traveling separately when they'd actually abandoned me. Security footage from the airport showed them leaving with all the luggage, including my suitcase, while I was still unconscious in the hotel. This is evidence of premeditated theft and abandonment, the Costa Rican investigator explained. Your daughter committed crimes in our country, as well as yours. The breakthrough came when Carlos discovered that Kurt's business in Costa Rica was actually a front for money laundering and tax evasion. His investment opportunities that had drained my savings were connected to illegal financial schemes that had been under investigation for months. Your daughter didn't just steal from you, Carlos revealed. She helped her husband steal from multiple investors using fraudulent business deals. The authorities have been waiting for enough evidence to move against him. By the end of my first week in Costa Rica, what had seemed like hopeless abandonment had become the foundation for destroying Linda and Kurt's entire scheme. Carlos had assembled a team of international lawyers, connected me with law enforcement in 2 countries, and documented evidence that would not only get me home, but ensure that my daughter and her husband faced serious criminal charges. Sometimes being abandoned by family leads you to discover allies you never knew existed, and sometimes those allies are more loyal than blood relatives ever were. Carlos and I launched our counteroffensive while Linda was still giving tearful interviews to Los Angeles news stations about her missing father with dementia. Using secure video links from Carlos's office, I appeared live on the same news programs that had been featuring Linda's fake grief, shocking viewers and reporters who thought I was lost in the Costa Rican jungle. I'm not missing, and I'm not suffering from dementia, I announced. I'm the victim of theft and abandonment by my own daughter and her husband. The media explosion was immediate and devastating for Linda's credibility. Her story fell apart within hours as reporters began asking hard questions about how a competent man could give such coherent interviews if he was suffering from the cognitive decline she'd described. The missing person report was formally retracted, and police began investigating Linda for filing false reports and making fraudulent statements to the media. Carlos had coordinated with Attorney Wilson to file emergency injunctions, freezing all transactions involving my assets until I could return to contest Linda's guardianship petition. The judge who'd been prepared to grant Linda control over my affairs was furious about being misled and immediately suspended all proceedings pending investigation of potential fraud. Ms. Martinez-Kruger, you've presented this court with false evidence about your father's condition, Judge Patricia Coleman said during an emergency hearing. These proceedings are suspended, and I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney for Criminal Investigation. The financial evidence against Linda and Kurt was overwhelming. Bank records showed they'd been systematically draining my accounts for months, using power of attorney documents I'd never signed and forged authorizations for major transactions. They'd sold my construction equipment, mortgaged my house without my knowledge, and transferred funds to offshore accounts connected to Kurt's money laundering operation. They weren't just stealing your money, Attorney Wilson explained. They were using your business as a front for international financial crimes. Linda's phone records revealed the depth of their planning and coordination. She'd been in contact with Kurt's criminal associates for months, discussing my removal from the financial picture and the timeline for liquidating my assets. Text messages showed they'd researched Costa Rican laws specifically to find a jurisdiction where abandoning me would be difficult to prosecute. Your daughter thought she'd found the perfect crime, Detective Rachel Torres explained. But criminals always underestimate the paper trail they leave behind. The Costa Rican authorities provided crucial evidence that destroyed any remaining sympathy for Linda and Kurt. Security footage from our hotel showed Kurt drugging my evening drink, while Linda distracted me with conversation about the next day's activities. Additional footage captured them removing my belongings from the room while I was unconscious, including my passport and wallet. This wasn't abandonment, the prosecutor explained. This was kidnapping followed by theft and false imprisonment. Kurt's arrest came first, as international authorities moved against his money laundering network and discovered the full scope of his criminal enterprise. My stolen money had been mixed with funds from multiple fraud victims, creating federal charges that would put him in prison for decades. Linda was arrested 48 hours later, charged with elder abuse, financial fraud, conspiracy, and making false statements to federal investigators. Her tearful media appearances had become evidence of her guilt rather than her innocence. The most satisfying moment came when Carlos and I flew back to Los Angeles, where I walked into my own house to find Linda and Kurt's belongings being removed by federal agents. Linda's shocked face when she saw me alive, competent, and accompanied by lawyers was worth every day of suffering she'd put me through. "Hello, daughter," I said calmly. "I'm home, and I brought some friends who want to talk to you about theft, fraud, and abandonment. Sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. It's about seeing criminals realize their perfect plan has become their perfect downfall." 6 months later, I'm sitting in my reclaimed living room, watching Linda get sentenced to 12 years for elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. Kurt received 25 years for money laundering, international fraud, and racketeering charges that went far beyond what he'd stolen from me. The judge called their scheme a particularly cruel betrayal of family trust combined with sophisticated international criminal activity. Linda's tears in court were real this time, but they were tears of remorse for getting caught, not for nearly destroying her father's life. The recovery of my assets exceeded even Carlos's optimistic predictions. Federal investigators found that Linda and Kurt had been planning to steal not just my money, but the money of several other elderly victims they'd identified through Kurt's business connections. My case had exposed an international elder abuse network that had stolen millions from families across 3 countries. "Your daughter's greed led us to a much bigger criminal enterprise," Detective Torres explained. "She thought she was committing one perfect crime, but she was actually documenting evidence of organized crime." Carlos became more than my attorney. He became my friend and business partner in a new venture helping elderly Americans who'd been victimized by family fraud. His expertise in international law combined with my experience as a fraud victim created a unique practice that connected abandoned elderly Americans with resources and legal support. "You turned your worst experience into a way to help others," Carlos told me during one of our planning meetings. "That's the best revenge against people who tried to make you disappear." The media attention transformed me from victim to advocate, and I've testified before Congress about the growing problem of families who use foreign countries to abandon elderly relatives while stealing their assets. Linda's case became a textbook example of inheritance theft tourism, and new laws have been passed to make international coordination easier for victims of such crimes. Your willingness to speak publicly probably saved hundreds of other elderly people from similar schemes, Attorney Wilson told me after my congressional testimony. My construction business not only survived Linda's attempt to destroy it, but thrived under new management that appreciated the company's reputation for integrity. The employees who'd worried about their jobs during the crisis became my strongest supporters, and several of them testified at Linda's trial about her attempts to manipulate company records and steal from pension funds. "Mr. Martinez, we never believed you'd abandoned us," my foreman Roberto said. "We knew someone had done something to you, and we're glad you fought back." The hardest part of recovery has been accepting that the daughter I loved for 42 years never really existed. The real Linda was someone who could drug her father, abandon him in a foreign country, and lie to the world about his mental competency while stealing everything he'd worked for. "You didn't fail as a father," my therapist reminds me. You succeeded in raising a daughter who chose to become someone you never taught her to be. Some people choose evil despite being raised with love, and their choices reflect their character, not their parents' failure. The greatest victory isn't the money I recovered or the justice Linda received. It's the discovery that strangers like Carlos can show more love and loyalty than family members who share your blood. When I was abandoned and helpless, Carlos didn't see a profitable client or a charity case. He saw a human being who deserved dignity and justice, and he fought for me like I was his own father. That kind of compassion reminds you that family isn't always about genetics. Sometimes it's about finding people who choose to stand with you when everyone else walks away. Looking back on those dark days in Costa Rica, I realize Linda and Kurt gave me an unexpected gift along with their betrayal. They showed me who I really am when everything is stripped away, and they introduced me to Carlos and a community of people dedicated to protecting vulnerable elderly Americans from family predators. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the most meaningful work of your life, and sometimes losing your family leads you to find your true purpose.